Yo, what's going on, Epic 7 fam? I'm Sue, and it's that time of year once again for a custom group summon tier list. Yes, that's right. It's been a number of months since I've had to do one of these. I'm going to break down what I think the best characters are along with the best accompanying artifacts, so that way I could help you make a decision to maximize your value on this banner in case you decide to roll it. If you're new, you just started with like the Dash Pass event or just came for like Tori and the Valentine's event. If you don't know what a custom group summon banner is, essentially, you'll select 3 heroes. Each character in the game has a accompanying artifact. It'll add those 3 heroes and their accompanying artifacts to a specific banner. That banner has no pity. You can roll on it as much as you want. If you hit a 5-star hero, it's guaranteed to be one of those 3-star heroes. If you hit a 5-star artifact, it's not guaranteed to be one of the accompanying, but it has a really high chance of being that thing. And for every summon you do, you get like a little token, and there's an accompanying shop. And for like, say, 120 tokens, which is basically 1 pity, you can buy one of the characters. So yes, there still is a pity. You just have to go through the extra step of acquiring the character through the shop. Couple of other rules I want to get into here before we jump into it. Certain characters, by the way, are not going to be on this banner. There are a few restrictions. A character, for example, has to be older than 6 months. So like, move my head out of the way here. This guy here, Schneel. Yeah, Schneel, him right here, that guy. He's 3.5 months old, so he will not be on the banner. So if you needed help with DDR, can't take him. Also, it goes without saying, no collab characters because they don't have the IP rights to them to put them on these banners. And if a character is limited, it has to have had a rerun at least once, which means notably the character Laia will not be on this banner. If for some reason she is on it, I will make a update in the pinned comment down below. Right? With all of that in mind, do not roll on this banner unless you have an astronomical amount of resources or don't mind spending money. Laia is probably coming back very soon, probably right after this banner goes away. So if you don't have the artifact Sweet Miracle, save for that. Also, there is probably a collab sometime in April or beyond, so save for that. Anyways, there are 50 characters here, right, on this entire tier list, so I'm going to try to go as fast as I possibly can. You will see an on-screen rating for how good I think the character is, rated from F to S, with F being the worst, A kind of being very good, and then S being the absolute best. I will also use the same ranking system for their accompanying artifact, and I'll say a little bit about the character before moving on to the next one. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's talk about the tiers, who's in them, what they are, so on and so forth. Top choice here, right? The top section. This is the one that I think most of you watching the video care about. Strong choice overall. These are the best ones. So if all you care about is what are the best things to put on the banner, it is this tier. After that, there are limited heroes, artifacts you get if you don't own. Limiteds, the only way for you to get them, if they have already reran once, right, if they're in this tier, is to basically take them on this banner if you want them. Otherwise, there has to be like a surprise event. Like, for example, during the Afternoon Soak Flan event, Landy showed up in the side story. Therefore, they ran Landy as a banner. But otherwise, your only chance to get these limited characters is here. So if you have all of this stuff here in the top tier, I highly recommend picking up everything in the second tier before you consider any of the other stuff in the third tier or the fourth tier. Third tier is characters you should own. I just think these are playable characters that have some use in the current PvP meta or are just generally very useful in PvE. Artifacts you should own, same thing. Just the best in class artifacts, and I'll go over those when we get to them. Not worth it, should be self-explanatory. And then obviously the last tier is all the stuff that you can't choose. All of the characters in their tiers, except for the first one, are alphabetized, right? So Alencia is not better than Arya, it is just literally alphabetized. This first tier here is, in my opinion, ranked by how strong I think they are, though. So let's start with the number 1 choice, and I think that is Diane. Diane is an incredible Soul Weaver for PvE. She's probably one of the best, like lifetime, probably the best PvE Soul Weaver in the entire game. So if you're looking for somebody to help carry you through challenging PvE content, she's very, very good. With her buffs, I think she is good in standard RTA, not top tier, but like certainly like high tier 2 with her buffs, so you could definitely take her there. If you're somebody who's serious about RTA, you just haven't needed to pick her up since then yes, she is worth playing in RTA, just not like best in class. And then her artifact Unfading Memories, I think, is criminally slept on by the player base. I think at plus 30, it is a very, very strong artifact, which is why Diane is going to be my number 1 overall choice. After that comes Ocean Breeze Lulika. In terms of PvE usage, she's not super great. Same thing with PvP usage, pretty niche, right? She's more of like a counter pick not like a standard fare like she used to be about a year and something ago. So yes, niche for her actual usage, but her artifact, Soul Consolation, is absolutely busted. It is a staple artifact for PvP. So if you're serious about PvP, this is one of the best Soul Weaver artifacts in the entire game. I think it goes Guardian Ice Crystals and then Soul Consolation, right? They are just that important for Soul Weavers. Next up, we have Cerise here. Cerise is pretty much going to always be in the top tier here for custom group summons. Not because Cerise is good. No, she's actually pretty much terrible. The only thing she's actually good for is expeditions, but it's because of her artifact being Guiding Light. Guiding Light is literally the artifact that carries the entire Ranger class. Most Rangers in PvP need Guiding Light in order to function. You can never have too many of this artifact, so therefore she lands here. Next up, we have Midnight Gala Lilius. She is a decent niche pick in PvP if you're trying to have a way that you can very quickly and efficiently blow up tanks. Obviously, Ilanav has kind of made her a bit more difficult to use. She still has some PvE usage, right? Decent in some PvE content. Usually, you'll use her in things like Ancient Inheritance, for example. You might also use her in Nightmare Labyrinth. She's pretty good there. Pretty good general use cases across the board. And her artifact, Hostess of the Banquet, I believe it's called. That thing is actually a pretty good artifact for any effect resistance based thief. Next up, we have Robbie. Robbie's pretty good for a new player. She'll help carry you through the adventure mode. She's also got some pretty good uses in things like Guild War or like Flag Arena. I think she's kind of niche to bad in World Arena in the current format, in my opinion. The main reason she's here is for her artifact, Sigurd Scythe. It's one of the best in class warrior artifacts. It's another one of these artifacts that you can never have enough of, and that is why she lands here on this list. Next up is Celine. Honestly, Celine is the best character in this entire tier for PvP. I don't even think you could play PvP point blank period without Celine on your account. But the reason why she's not the #1 overall is because all of those other characters that we talked about, they are either limited, right? Or they don't have a story banner. Robbie did not have a story banner. Celine, you can pick up anytime by opening up the story summon. So therefore, she's not as valuable, but she is still an incredibly powerful character, and you cannot get enough copies of her artifact, Storm Sword. Next up, we have Crow. Crow's just a rock-solid tank, as he always has been, much better after his buffs. I would say he's like the 3rd best tank in PvP right now. I think Adventurer, Rouse, and Albedo are a little bit better than him, but if you're looking for a strong tank in all PvP game modes, he's very good after his changes. On top of that, his accompanying artifact, Holy Sacrifice, is just a staple knight artifact that you're going to want to have a +30 copy of, or potentially 2 +30 copies of, so getting extra dupes of his artifact has high value. After that, we move on to Red Lilius. I'll be honest, after Red Lilius's changes, this most recent patch, I think she's pretty bad in PvP. I've had other people tell me she's pretty good in tandem with like her Provoke and a damage build, but I have yet to see it. So right now, looking at her like 43% win rate in PvP, yeah, I would steer clear of her if you're looking for a PvP character. Still very strong in PvE content, and the main reason that she's here in this tier is because her accompanying artifact is Bastion of Pelusia. If you're a turn 2 player, we are in a Bastion of Pelusia meta. You definitely want to have 1 or maybe even 2 +30 Bastion of Pelusias. It will go a very, very long way at high levels. So that's why she lands here in this category as opposed to artifacts you should own, because Bastion really is a staple of the current format. And then lastly, to round out the tier here, is going to be Issaria. She's mostly here just because she's one of the best PvE characters in the game, and her accompanying artifact, Song of Stars, one of the best PvE artifacts in the entire game. So if you're new, or you're somebody who hasn't cleared all of the PvE content, this is absolutely one for you to pick up. Make sure you don't miss this character, that you have her somewhere on your account. Alright, now with the strong choices overall out of the way, let's talk about the limited characters next. First up, we have Ahmed. She is pretty good for players that want to play aggressively, but she's not really super usable. I feel like Frida kind of has taken her niche. So if you have Frida, you could kind of skip Ahmed. I don't really ever see her artifact being used on anyone anyway. It's sometimes used in like Hall of Trials, but that's kind of it. Unless you really like the character, or for some reason you find that your Frida is always being banned, I would skip this character. Next up, we have Blooming Lidica, who already recently had a rerun a couple of months back. She's like a niche character for like aggro cleave playstyles that can potentially one-shot characters if she has good setup, and her artifact, Seductive Flower, it's like only used on herself and Elvira, and that's kind of it. Next up, we have Biblis. Biblis's best use right now is for Nightmare Raid Queen. If you're already using Rowana for something like, say, Juleeve Council, then you can obviously pick up Biblis and she'll make that queen fight super easy for you. Super niche PvP character, not really good in most of the Guild War or the World Arena fights that I see. Has a lot more mileage, I feel like, in Flag Arena, for example, and her accompanying artifact is only really good on herself. Next up is Fairy Tail Tenebria. Used to be a character that would always appear in my top tier, but not so much anymore. I feel like the character Tenebria isn't really used anywhere, right? Like, every once in a while you'll see somebody break the character out, but for the most part, I don't see her in any form of PvP. The main reason that she is here is because of her artifact Fairy Tail for a Nightmare. That's like the main reason that you'd want to take her. But even then, I don't think it's as good as it used to be. For example, Arya used to be a great user for it in the past, but now she could use like Staff of Ainzul-Gon. Bastion of Hope is obviously still a replacement. And the other characters you would want to play, like Archdemon Shadow, Harsetti, or Solitaria of the Snow, they all have comparable or different builds that they can play right now. Solitaria is probably the one that I think has the best use case with it. Like, she's the one that's most reliant on it, right? Because, for example, Harsetti can use Bubble Maker or Abyssal. So again, it's just the byproduct of, I think, the characters that can use Fairy Tail for a Nightmare. Most of them have moved on or can use all their artifacts. That's why I rate it a bit lower than I have in the past. Next up, we have Holiday Euphine. Holiday Euphine is honestly not very good. She used to be good as like an anti-cleave character, but even then, I don't think she's particularly worth playing right now. The main reason you take her is for Champions Trophy. That's largely for like Bad Cat Armin meme builds, because right now, nobody else really uses that artifact, at least in high-end PvP. Next up, we have Green Landy, one of the best PvE characters still to this day in the entire game. If you're trying to clear all the PvE content, one of the best things that you can possibly pick up from this banner. As far as PvP goes, that depends. You see, right now, DN is starting to see some play because of her changes. Landy is very, very good in that matchup, so if DN starts to pop off, I expect the return of a really fast Green Landy in the metagame, but we'll wait and see. Her accompanying artifact, Wall of Order, is decent, but not exactly great. Next up, we have Lethe. The main reason to choose her is you think she's hot or you think her gameplay loop is pretty fun. Right now, Injury is very strong with Urban Shadow Shu and Death Dealer Ray, so she's not really used anywhere outside of like maybe an arena or maybe a Guild War offense once in a blue moon if you kind of feel like playing her. The main selling point for her is, of course, her artifact, Prayer of Solitude. It's just very good on a lot of health scaling bruisers. If they ever make a return to the metagame in full force, like the old Apocalypse Robbie days, then you're going to want to have access to this artifact. Next up, we have my girl, the unofficial E7 mascot, the bestest girl, Luna. If all you care about is her looks, then I encourage you to pull for her. If you care about her gameplay, then I urge you to kind of exercise caution. She is solid in a lot of PvE content, and she's sometimes usable in like Guild War offense, but that's kind of it. If I'm being honest, she definitely needs buffs. The main reason to consider her is either one, to pick her up because you think she looks hot, or two, Draco Plate because it's a rock solid warrior artifact in a lot of situations. Next up, we have Seaside Bologna. I'll be honest, Seaside Bologna has kind of seen some better times. You sometimes see people use her as like a niche pick in PvP, but it's like way outside of the box pick, and usually because they don't have Lone Crescent Bologna, her ML version, right? The main reason to choose her is for her PvE usage, specifically things like Wyvern. If you want to try to build some of the Wyvern one-shots, her artifact, which is the Reingar Special Drink, is okay on her, and that's kind of it. There's not really too many other users. Next up is Summer Break Charlotte. This is a character that is kind of outdated. You usually used to use her as like a cleaver, but not too many people play her much anymore. The main selling point for the character is her artifact Mature Sunglasses, which is basically the knight version of Draco Plate. It's just something you put on a damage dealing knight if you don't want to play like Elbrus Ritual Sword, for example, and you don't have access to Victorious Flag because they're a Moonlight. Next up is Summertime Issaria. I think this is probably the best character overall to take in this tier. If you're just looking for somebody from a PvP standpoint, She is decent as a cleave option after her exclusive equipment, but the main reason to take her is Star of the Deep Sea, which is her limited artifact, and having this really enables certain characters. Like if you have Pirate Captain Flan or you want to be a Pirate Captain Flan player, you need this artifact, right? It's pretty much non-negotiable. Like this is the best in slot option for several characters. If you want to play them, you absolutely need to have this thing, and that's why I think she has the most overall value in this tier. Alright, now let's move on to characters you should own, starting with Alencia. Alencia is a budget injury character for those of you that don't have Death Dealer Ray or Urban Shadow Shu. She's also fairly good in tandem with Young Senya for things like Guild War offense. So if you're looking for a character to pair with Young Senya, obviously Alencia was designed with that character in mind, so that is why she lands here. Next up is Arya. Arya is phenomenal in a lot of PvE content. She can carry you through things like Abyss. She's very, very good at Wyvern. And if you have the gear to make it work, she's one of the staple Guild War offense units from what I've seen with my guild. And she's also reasonably good as a last pick in World Arena. Very popular character for obvious reasons. Her accompanying artifact is okay for her if you got a really good set of gear. Otherwise, you could basically just skip it. Next up, we have Destina. Destina is just like a rock-solid cleanser slash reviver. If you just don't have good cleansers in your kit, you don't have access to characters like Ruel, Blood Moon Haste, Maid Chloe, this could be a pretty good budget reviver for you. And then her accompanying artifact, Shamadra Staff, also very, very good. Just a character that, even though she's not in favor now, you kind of really would like to have on your account in case she makes a return to prominence, because the meta calls for it. Next up is Ida. Her accompanying artifact is complete garbage, and the main reason that you'd want to play her is because she's super good in like Guild War offense as like a cleave option. If you don't have like Eternal Wanderer or Ludwig, for example, one of the teams I commonly play is like New Moon Luna, Ida, and another mage like Requiem Rwana. Very easily cleave through a lot of the Guild War defenses that are out there. So that's why I think she is worth having. She's just amazing budget cleave option, even for those people who don't have very much speed or very good gear or characters for cleave in general. Next up is Elena, just amazingly fantastic character in PvP versus high AoE compositions. I personally use her to beat Harsetti when they have either taken or banned Young Senya from me, so that's where I primarily use her for. Again, if you're looking for a character that's good versus AoE heavy comps, this is the Soul Weaver to choose. You should always have one of these waiting in your wings. Her company artifact is pretty good on Green Rwana, but otherwise not really used anywhere else. Next up is Elagod, Elagos himself here, right? He is a amazing counter pick for Afternoon Soaked Flan for all players. He's also one of the best characters to play if you're somebody who likes to cleave or be aggro in PvP. His buffs, as well as like his exclusive equipment, make him phenomenal. His accompanying artifact is only really good on him. Next up is Janua. Janua is not as good as he used to be 6 months ago, but he's still one of the best single target DPS in the entire game. So if you're looking for a strong single target DPS, this is probably the one for you to pick up. His accompanying artifact is decent on him and sometimes is like a second or third best option for a lot of other thieves out there. Next up, we have Blue Lua. She is still a decent like last pick counter pick in PvP, a character that can reset cooldowns and has some CC that's that tanky and that fast on Guiding Light. Can never truly really be bad. She's not as broken as she used to be, because obviously Laya kind of put a stop to that, but against unsuspecting opponents, right, this is a really, really strong character. And then her accompanying artifact, Spatio-Temporal Fan, is obviously good on not only her, but Sea Phantom Politis. Moving on, we have Mort. Mort is probably the strongest character overall in this entire tier. He just shuts off an entire game mechanic, basically says no one's allowed to counterattack but me. His S3 does massive damage, and it completely CCs the entire enemy team. There is no account, I think, right now that can't benefit from Mort. He's incredible on Guild War defense, arena offense, World Arena, Guild War offense, all of it. He's good at all of it. His accompanying artifact is decent on, like, Red Lilius, but that's kind of it. After that, we have NIKKE, one of the best 4th/5th pick characters in World Arena in the entire game. She just completely shuts off certain teams. There are certain teams that just cannot play against NIKKE. And right now, having a character that can seal on your account, whether that's New Moon Luna, Archdemon Shadow, or NIKKE, is very invaluable, because there's some really busted passives that are currently in the game, like Empyrean Illinav. So being able to seal them is a godsend. Her accompanying artifact, by the way, is also very, very strong, Elegiac Candle. It's basically a different version of Misconfile from the Guilty Gear collab, so if you missed that artifact, this is a character with a strong artifact for you to pick up. After that, we have Peyra. I think Peyra can still work in PvP. She's got a lot of things going for her. Second fastest character in the game, pseudo tank, has buff strips, good CC. Problem is that Harsetti and Zio make it very hard for you to kind of thread the needle with her, and she has a couple of other bad matchups, so she's not super strong in PvP, but I have seen people make her work, which is why she is still here, as opposed to Ran, which Ran I have not seen anybody kind of use in a while, right? And even then, I've still used on my alt account Peyra as a tank for PvE content, so hey, at least she still has some mileage and utility outside of just being a general aggressive PvP setup. After that, we have Politis. This is just an evergreen character if you're serious about PvP, right? She punishes non-attack skills with an AoE, and you can build her a multitude of different ways. She's not as good as Green Celine is right now. She's definitely, I would say, like a whole tier or two weaker than Green Celine, but hey, she's one of the few non-attack skill punishes in the game. You should always have a red Politis geared on your account. After that, we come to a Rowana. Rowana is just one of the most generally busted characters in all of Epic 7. Her passive Vigilant Eye is just insane. Whenever it actually works, which is when an enemy uses a counterattack, dual attack, or extra attack, your team just gets free combat raise and free healing. So if your opponent has a bunch of AoE counters, she's basically a free win, and that applies to PvE content as well. There are so many bosses in Epic 7 that you could choose with Rowana. When she's good, she actually just straight up breaks the game. And then finally, last in this tier is Vildred. Amazing for new players in Adventure. The primary reason that he is here is that he is the only character in the game with a 12 speed imprint. So if you are serious about PvP, you should always have a Vildred geared for his speed imprint, because it could actually just save you in PvP. But for other people that aren't trying to do that, he's primarily for things like as a Manic Hunt or Adventure. Alright, let's move on to the last tier now, which is artifacts you should own, starting with probably the most controversial one in the tier, which is Abigail. Previously, I had Abigail in strong choice overall because Abigail was a decent character and Golden Rose was absolutely busted at the time. Abigail right now is kind of inconsistent, I feel like, in a lot of PvP game modes. And Golden Rose doesn't really have too many users in the current metagame, right? Lionheart Sermi is not really particularly very good. Most of the characters that can use it aren't really that strong. Like Designer Lilibet is probably the best overall user, and even then, her playability is on the decline slightly, right? She's just not as played as she used to be. So that's why Abigail ends up here. Golden Rose is absolutely, though, an artifact you should still have on your account. Next up, we have Araminta, who's completely overshadowed by her ML counterpart, Silverblade Araminta, who's already kind of like good to niche, right? She's not like super heavily played, but she's not played either. The main reason that you're choosing Araminta is for Etika Scepter, which is one of the best in slot options for New Moon Luna. So if you're looking to get the most out of New Moon Luna, Araminta might be worth a consideration. Next up, we have Basar. He's not really that good, but his accompanying artifact is Abyssal Crown, which historically is one of the most broken artifacts in all of Epic 7. If you're trying to play control compositions in PvP, you will need Abyssal Crown, and some PvE content as well is trivialized by having it, so it's definitely a good idea to have one on your account. Next up, we have Birgitta, who's probably the worst 5-star in the entire game, but her artifact, Bird's Eye View, is just the Soul Weaver version of Ancient Book, which is the best artifact in Epic 7, so that accounts for something. After that, we move on to Red Cecilia, whose only real use right now is in the Green Exposition. Brieg has kind of replaced her in all other forms of content. The main reason that she ends up here is because her artifact is Rise of a Monarch, which is by most people considered to be the best in slot option for Empyrean Illinev. So if you're looking to kind of get the best in slot artifact for that character, here is Cecilia. Next up, we have Charlotte. This is another character historically that I've had in strong choice overall. Charlotte herself is not very good, but her accompanying artifact is Elbrus Ritual Sword, which is something that you used to never could have enough copies of, right? You would always want like 5, 6, 7 maxed out Elbrus Ritual Swords. It's still one of the best knight artifacts in the entire game. I would argue behind Arius, it used to be the second best artifact in the game. But right now, most Elbrus users are either not super great in the meta or are very fringe, and the ones that actually are still good in the meta prefer Albedo's artifact 3F. So if you are, have 3F, play that artifact instead. If you don't, consider Elbrus Ritual Sword. It's still one of the best knight artifacts in the game. I just don't think it's as good as 3F is. Next up, we have Fenris. Fenris is really good in the blue expedition from what I have heard, but the primary selling point for him is his artifact Renewed Will. It's an insane artifact for cleavers, so if you're somebody that is trying to cleave with like Briar Witch Assaria or other rangers, it is definitely one to consider. You're definitely going to want to have a maxed out copy of this thing. After that, we move on to Blue Flan. The character is like at least somewhat usable in like Wyvern, and then you have her fans that'll bring her out every once in a while in World Arena, but the character is not really the reason you're choosing her. It's for her artifact Unseen Observer, which is just essentially the ranger version of Book, right? So if you're playing Sea Phantom Politis and you need souls in your strategy, this is one that you're going to want to have access to. After that, we have Immortal Wukong, which you could probably argue should be under characters you should own, but I think that he's like very inconsistent in his usage in PvP. I've had people in my Discord have great success with him, but me personally, I haven't really had amazing success with him. The thing that I want to point out though is his artifact, which I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce, is insane. It gives so much free stats, right? You can build some absolutely crazy characters, some cracked out warriors on this artifact. I think it is the most slept on artifact in the entire game. I have built Blue Lunas and other characters on this artifact, and they have just absolutely crushed. It allows me to play counter set or like lifesteal set when otherwise I would not have been able to do so because of how much free stats this thing actually gives out. It's also important to note that Wukong does not have a story summon. This is one of those characters where if you missed him the last 2 times, now is the time to grab him. After that, we move on to Kairon. He is not really that great of a character. The main reason you're choosing him is for his artifact, Shepherd of the Hollow, which is one of the best dodge thief artifacts in the entire game. It's great on Bloodblade Corinne, great on Remnant Violet, especially after his changes. So if you're trying to play one of those 2 characters, right, or like maybe even a Savior Auden, New Kid Auden, then this is definitely the character you want to take a look at. After that, we have Ludwig. He is a passable cleaver in Flag Arena, but not much else. The main reason you're choosing him is for his artifact Time Matter, which is one of the biggest damage amps for a character in the game. I have played it on Zeo for like a year and something now at this point. Bruiser Zeos love this artifact, and there are other high damage mages that want to kind of take advantage of it as well. After that, we move on to Blue Lulika, who is kind of like, an all-rounder. She's not really amazing anywhere. She's just kind of decent everywhere. The main reason you're kind of picking her up here is for her artifact Spirit's Breath. I'm a lot lower on this than other content creators, namely Tristan Wolf. Tristan Wolf thinks it's one of the staple, most busted PvE artifacts in the entire game. I'm not that high on it. I do recognize that it's very powerful. Certain Hall of Trials strategies really want this. So if that's you, if you're trying to min-max your PvE experience, then maybe consider taking Lulika to get a maxed out Spirit's Breath. After that, we have Green Ray, who's pretty much only played for Nightmare Juleeve Council and nothing else. The main reason you're choosing him is for his artifact Doctor's Bag, which is very important for certain characters like Blue Elena or for Moon Bunny Dominiel. So if you want to play one of those 2 characters, that is why you would pick Ray. Next up, we have Teiyu. Teiyu honestly has surprised me a lot lately. He's a lot better of a character than people seem to think he is, right? I've gotten rolled by a couple of these on ladder. Brad, who's one of my viewers, famously has rolled me and other people in our lobbies with this character, so he is definitely slept on, but I don't think he is meta. The main reason to choose him, though, is for his artifact Spirit of Purification, which is finally starting to gain some traction and is a pretty solid artifact in the current meta. After that, we have Euphine, who's kind of like a budget/bad version of Jacko. So if you are trying to cleave and you don't have Jacko, you could use Euphine, but I don't really recommend it. The main reason you're choosing her is for her artifact Merciless Glutton, which is great for any aggressive warrior-based strategy. After that, and finally wrapping it up, we have Zahak. Zahak's only real use is like Nightmare Juleeve Council. Other than that, the main reason you're choosing him is for Pure White Trust, because after its changes, it's essentially the warrior version of Book, and it has synergy with certain characters like Lone Wolf Peyra and the upcoming new version of ML Teiyu. And there you go. That is it That is the entire custom group summon tier list. Hopefully this video was of help to you. If you have any questions, feel free as always to ask them down in the comment section below. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later now.